The wonderful Kurt Doolittle, the inevitable, inimitable, and dapperly dressed.
I'm wearing my judge's robes today because you teased me yesterday. So
Oh, yesterday.
was it yesterday? No.
Well, I don't believe so, but I may have.
Well, sometime this week.
Yes, it's true.
So I'm wearing my my judicial robes.
Excellent. Excellent. They blend well with your background.
Yeah, there's not really much contrast, is there here?
There's just a hint of your chair.
So
It's
floating head. It's floating head.
Yes. It adds to the mystical nature.
Yeah.
I want you to know this. I cleaned my coffee cup just for this episode, which is episode 2054.
Wow.
Hit like, hit subscribe, hit notifications or whatever ding lungs there are there, and then leave all your wonderful comments, everybody. We've so much to discuss today, Kurt, because this has been a very eventful week.
Oh my, has it ever?
The nonsense is to such an extreme that I am of the opinion that this is all a counterintelligence operation to make the American nation, the United States, reform to its Western civilizational roots. That appears to be the intention, because everything that the current beta administration is doing is driving the population to that end.
Well, again, we're attributing intent to a feminine intuition that is an example of hypergamy and hyperconsumption, which is to always go too far.
I know they have. It seems like they have no choice. They must. They're tasked. They have to try. And so, what my personal ponderings was, I was thinking about this because in our diamond shaped function, there it is for the audience, with the alpha at the top and the beta at the bottom triangle, and the line between masculine and feminine I identified it yesterday as the horizon of moral outrage, which is the limit of cooperation. Kurt's processing that for everybody who sees him looking.
Yes, keep going.
And so it's like this: is the beta state exists below the moral horizon, and the alpha state exists above the moral horizon, and they two shall not mix because they're incompatible. Sorry, this is de novo for Kurt, so I apologize for bringing.
Well, I want to test it.
Yes.
And I think as you mean it, as a trait expression, yes. Like if I'm performing a clear, yeah, we love how the word clerical has been abused. It's ambiguous. An administrative function in an army where I'm and I'm under the natural law, right? Which is right. That's different from performing an administrative function in a political system, a bureaucracy. In other words, where the criteria isn't duty or loyalty, but political assistance and organizing. And if I'm doing the same beta administration in a clerisy where I'm creating a social organization, yes. If I'm just sorry for the audience, I'm disambiguating this into disambiguating this statement so that I can make sure I understand, Brad. Yes, the question, it's like many things, is organizing is either for good or ill ends. And what are the three means of organization?
Okay.
You can organize for duty, but the duty has to be moral or immoral, can be moral, immoral. You can organize for reciprocity, and reciprocity can only be moral. So we then have to disambiguate uh, uh, duty and loyalty. In other words, we have to disambiguate reciprocity from duty and loyalty from devotion. And so what happens is that, yes, the betas make use of devotion, the feminine, which is basically undermining. They organize under bureaucracy, which is undermining. But they can't organize by reciprocity, whereas alphas cannot organize by devotion. They can organize by bureaucracy and loyalty, and they can organize by reciprocity. So yes, your statement is correct.
It's interesting.
I guess, so just for the audience, that's what a proof looks like.
That was hard, man.
So the problem is that when people listen to us, they don't realize that in our world, we're always writing proofs. The thing is, you can't talk in proofs. Well, Kurt can sometimes,
Kurt can.
and it overwhelms the audience. But you can. I mean, Luke does it all the freaking time. Brandon does it, certainly. I mean, like, there's no difference between between Martin and I. And what you do very well is you try to create a bridge between the more common vernaculars and and the sort of decomposition that I put together. Brandon said a very interesting statement, is that my job is to create, what I seem to do is create the decomposition, the construction, and the rest of you guys seem to create projections, forecasts or explanations.
Right, to make it synthesis for the English speakers.
Well, I mean, it's just Luke absolutely positive. I mean, it's not somewhere. It's more like Brandon and you do that. Luke is definitely a philosopher in the sense that he's applying the method and he writes sentences. I think the guy that I call that's Contra Fabian, who I don't know if we can use his real name. I suppose not yet. The guy that's left the movement and gone over to the dark side, so to speak. Martin and I we tend to focus on basically writing equations, writing proofs, equations and proofs. Luke writes equations, but he's more interested in philosophy, in personal choice, how to be a better person.
Yes.
Right.
Right, because it will be application of it to the individual level.
Yes. And so it's just interesting to watch how we all sort of specialize. But anyway, yes, I want, rather than distract from your beautiful little conversation, that you started out asking a question and I've said, okay, do I understand this? Yes. So can you pick up where you left off, and
there you go.
Try to shut up now.
So you did good. The reason I came to this is because I heard some conversation. I don't remember the source of it right now immediately. Oh, it was what's his name? It's shoot. He's a political guy. Shoot, he's talking about the administrative state. And I said that matches the beta state, is what I'm calling it, which is the way Babylon was oriented or organized, which is the organization of betas, which don't care who the alphas are, because the new alphas are going to come in when the old alphas get weak. In fact, they're probably going to get undermined by the betas and invite the new alphas in so that they have cordial relations upon arrival.
We can generalize that to a law really easily.
How so?
Is that what we're always trying to do is create scale.
Okay.
So reciprocity is really obvious at the end of it. In other words, really obvious at the individual scale. Right? It's relatively like empathy. It's really obvious at the group scale, right? The group scale. The problem is that both empathy and reciprocity and order, all three, right? Empathy, reciprocity, and systemization. All of these things encounter problems as the problems of malincentives as they scale. The only solution to which is continuing the test of reciprocity by what we call the natural common concurrent law. In other words, the degree with which you can maintain reciprocity as you scale any organization or set of organizations, including that set of organizations we call the government and the polity. They're always going to run into one of the problems if they don't maintain reciprocity.
That's
In
right.
other words, right? So the problem of crime and the problem of order, basically what you're calling corruption, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're calling it, right? I mean, what you're describing, betas, is corruption.
Yes, it's malincentives.
Right.
The proper terminology corruption would be defined as the malincentives that permeate the system in order to continue the wheels turning despite the irreciprocity of it all.
Correct. So the problem is, you have to increase the precision of your law by increasing the precision of of natural law towards the science of natural law, in other words, and you have to create a market, maintain the market for the application of natural law in order to scale without, by scale, offsetting all advantages of scale by corruption. That's the law, right? That's the law of human organizations, is that with any order or organization of people, the only way to preserve, not produce malincentives, is to preserve, in other words, not turn empathy and order or trade itself, like bribery, right? In order for all of these things to scale, you have to have both the law, really is the science of the law, and you have to have the market for the application of the law. Whatever scale, the returns of whatever scale you seek to produce by whatever means are dependent upon what I call the continuous recursive expansion of the market for the application of the natural law. I watched your eyes and that didn't catch. So
continuous. What's the market for the natural law? What courts? Yeah, that's what I thought was, but that's why I just wanted to be clear.
Yes. The problem is, like, for very pragmatic reasons, they undermine the common law for the simple reason that it allowed for the increase in taxation. So the canonical example we use in libertarianism is when the state allowed pollution because it allowed high employment and high profits. The problem is the cumulative effect of pollution by coal, right, was pretty damaging. Now, let's take this to the following ends. However, that becomes a temporary asymmetry, as what happens is people allow pollution only during this initial phase, and then they disallow it and correct for it.
Right.
So that's what happens in all economies, right? Is people tolerate an initial harm. The problem is, likewise, the initial harm that people tolerate by the abrogation of the natural law, by allowing things like pollution or early corruption, we seek to correct over time. The problem is, you can correct for pollution really easily, but you can't correct for corruption easily. In other words, systems become corrupt because they become evolutionary, where pollution doesn't become evolutionary, it just becomes more. No, pollution can't adapt, right? But people can. So the problem is, you may say, well, let's create a debt pollution, which we will then pay for later by correction. Right. And it turns out you can do that, right? You can create, but the debt we create by corruption is we have to have a civil war.
Okay. So,
right.
So
what am I?
What's interesting about this?
I'm making my point. I think I'm making my point, but you're seeing something.
There's an interesting evolution there, which is this. So I'm looking at the evolution of the United States, which is the pollution increased to its apogee in the 70s, I'd say. And what happened was the creation of further administrative state authority.
Well, actually, let's diss on the United States because it's a great example, right? Because this example, that's not the only time it happened.
Oh, I agree.
Okay, so what happens originally is that we run into the problem of clientelism in American politics.
Okay.
So originally, the United States federal government was set up to be quite small, and set up to basically mirror the European nobility, except by exclusively a middle class nobility, right? So you had to have some merit in getting there.
Right.
Right. There was no inherited nobility. There was only merited nobility. And so that's where you get the founders from. Their merit, they're a natural aristocracy rather than an entrenched. Even though we failed to understand at that time that the entrenched nobility actually had really good incentives that we failed to understand were just being modified by the change in the economy as we went through the various agrarian financial and trade and industrial and technological revolutions. Mm-hmm. So we set out this way. I'm going to lose the audience, and I might lose myself in this story.
I'll try to keep you on track, brother.
Okay, so the point being that this problem you're talking about in the 70s happened a couple of times in America. Fukuyama is the best person who explains the problem of clientelism. So whereas we went from loyalty under monarchies between the great families, which tended to have positive incentives, except for they failed to find a way of adapting to the rise in income by the middle class and finding a way to bring into the aristocracy the middle class, as they had brought other noble families into the nobility. They didn't find a way to do that sufficient to account for the shift from the nobility becoming purely cultural, as we see in the monarchy today in England, or the nobility. It becomes purely cultural, right? And that is an asset. It's no longer economic, it's cultural. That's the asset they're protecting. When I mean that as the institutions, the culture, the traditions, right? The nobility becomes a secular priest, essentially a secular priesthood, which is what the King, Queen of England is today. Right? Which is why they don't like her, is because she actually is the source of the cultural tradition that's persistent through it. Well, that's what we want the monarchies to be. So we got this. But what happened was we reinstituted clientelism. So instead of a natural aristocracy and loyalty between the aristocracy, we created clientelism. An American, what we complain about during the late 1800s, the mid to late 1800s, is the government needed to scale in response to the Western expansion due to, at first, the Louisiana Purchase, right? They needed to, so we needed a bigger government to be able to settle that territory, because the economic and political advantage of having that territory was higher than not. It was, in other words, it was necessary. So just like pollution, we went into debt. We went into political and cultural debt, creating the incentives for corruption during the westward expansion, which we had to then correct by what we saw as the managerial state later on.
So this
Which
would be
starts-
the modification of the United States government after the Civil War,
Right.
and the subsequent modification prior to World War I,
Correct.
the great the New Deal.
Right. So we have to, the problem, most people can't conceive of more than one axis of logic at a time. This is why we're always saying disambiguate, serialize, and then track each thing that's going through a cycle. Don't project everything from a single axis of measurement.
Right.
So now we've said, okay, the nobility shifted, right? We created a new middle class nobility because the economic demands on because of the economic demands of the colonies, right? It was absolutely positively intentional that our ancestors prohibited the parasitism of the church, the parasitism of the aristocracy, and the parasitism of the peasantry. All three. I put up 4 fingers. All three. Right. So the middle class, the top, prohibited the parasitism of the church, the left, the parasitism of the aristocracy, the right, and the parasitism of the peasantry, the bottom. It prohibited all three. That's what the American experiment was. It's basically an re-expression of the Germanic evolution from over time, which created the city-states and the Hanseatic League, the city-states, and England expressed that as the modern state.
Right.
To which France rebelled, Germany rebelled, the Jews rebelled, Russia rebelled, China rebelled, India rebelled, Africa is still rebelling, right? They're all still rebelling, but the most important one is the Middle East, because we're still religiously interwoven with the Middle East, even though we're culturally, politically not. So,
right. Now,
right.
so when I talk about it was Steve Bannon who was talking about.
Wait a minute, I want to make sure that that if we're going to take a sidetrack, that I'm making a very complex argument, that you're keeping me in the argument, giving an example rather than taking me off track.
No, I'm not going to take you off track. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, it's okay if you're going to reinforce my argument, but if you're going to take me off track, I am absolutely going to lose.
No, I'm going to let you. I'm going to let you go. I don't know. I'm a fear of deviation. I don't know that it will deviate you, but I'm afraid.
Okay, you start out with the premise of the 70s being an increase in corruption. It
was increase in the power of the administrative authoritarian state.
Correct.
As a response to the pollution.
Right. Right. So the pollution is the canonical example because it allows us to understand that we will sometimes go into debt, immorality, in order to achieve an end, which was then we correct for later by eliminating pollution. Right. I mean, that's right. So that's just an example, because what we can see is every single sieve goes through it. They allow pollution during industrialization, which is necessary to create the capital to raise them out of poverty. And then what happens is the emergent middle class then doesn't like the pollution and then pays to get rid of it. Right? We see this every fucking where. China, of course, does everything too big, too fast, too hard, and too poorly, which means that they now have polluted the whole fucking country, and God knows if they can get out of it, because they try to do everything by bypassing the evolutionary states that we all need to go through in order to become advanced civilizations. And anyway, so I'm going back to, yeah, but America went through these same fucking cycles that everybody else goes. Europe went through these same cycles. The difference is European went through a majority middle class experiment, and Europe didn't. They retained the peasantry, the cult of the peasantry, the cult of the aristocracy, and the cult of the clerisy. They think by killing the cult of the clerisy and killing the aristocracy, they have solved the problem, but they never killed the cult of the peasantry, whereas America did. So that's why Marxism could take root in Europe, right? And woke could take place, but it couldn't take place in America, take root in America. But woke could take place in America because we brought in the problem of race, which is a real problem, which is fundamentally a class problem. In other words, the difference in the problems between the races is simply a difference in the size of the classes in the races. In other words, the problem of race in America is a class problem. We brought in through race two things by not sending them back, so to speak.
Lincoln wanted to do.
As Lincoln wanted to do, we wanted to send them back, which was a high cost. So they wouldn't pay the cost then, so we pay the cost now. Right? So there's an important so we pay the cost now of having brought into ourselves the class problem, recreating the class problem that they have in Europe, which ended up in social democracy, which is what they're trying to bring here and bring us the same social democracy, except America can't work under social democracy. Right? Because the middle class majority experiment can't work, so there we have to revert to top and bottom against the middle, right? Which is what Europe has done, right? And so now we have a top and they have a top and bottom.
Classic Marxist bullshit. Excuse me.
Well, yeah,
that was actually not French. It was Hebrew. Sorry.
All right. Well, I mean, the French are just Latin Catholic, authoritarian Latin Catholic. So the French just secularized the Catholic Church. And if you look at the Catholic Church today, it's reverted to its original communist. In other words, the church was captured in Europe by the aristocracy, which made it into the Catholic Church, which natural law, and which eventually made it into the Protestant Church, which was an elimination of the bureaucracy, right? Because Central Europe, Germanic Europe had basically used manorialism to eradicate the lower classes, genetically eradicate them, right? And that came to England and then to America as a majority middle class society, which is reverting back to the Germanic tradition and the old European tradition. But France has stayed feminine, authoritarian, Latin, basically Hebrew. And so it's maintained and so you see that in the construction of French law, continental law, which is authoritarian, rather than Germanic common law, which is evolutionary, which is empirical. And so the problem is under I know you're letting me go, but the audience will understand. I know.
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm just holding my tongue for Uncle Kenny.
Okay, so the problem is that as we see, the French authoritarian and Russian authoritarian and Chinese authoritarian, these laws, these are historical systems of law, tell you what you can do and what you can't do. Whereas in the common Germanic law, we only tell you what you can't do. We don't tell you what you can do. You can do anything, that you can't do.
Right.
So evolutionary velocity, in other words, they wonder why all the intellectuals and all the commercial ventures leave Europe for the USA. The entrepreneurs, they leave and come to the USA because we're still this middle class economy that tries to suppress the top, tries to suppress the bottom, so that everybody has to conform to becoming the middle. Right. Well, what happens to Europe is there's the brain drain. What's happening to Russia? There's a brain drain. Where are we getting all these scientists? Well, we're getting them from India and China, right? And we're getting their a lot of their top people, and less so now because for the past 10 years, China's had the fake miracle, right? And now that miracle is being exposed as a fraud. Our miracle isn't. However, what's happened is that the Marxist woke have tried to use our Christian forgiveness, our lack of prohibition on what you must do, and our exclusive prohibition on what you must do as an opportunity to bring woke here, to convert from class Marxism, creating the top and bottom against the middle, to race Marxism, which is again just class Marxism in a different robe, in order to shift us from back into top and bottom against the middle. So the betas, in other words, the credentialists,
Yes,
who are not natural aristocracy, because natural aristocracy means surviving in reality, not against credentials. No, what's reality? It's only military and commercial. That's it. Those are the only realities that are evolutionary expressions that are tested for evolutionary success against the real world, whereas credentialists are tests against the social world, which allows for the maximization of lying against evolutionary pressures of the real world. And there, until the point, because they only run out of fake success until they've run out of ability to engage in parasitism. So what all civilizations other than the West under the aristocracies did is they created credentialist classes that ran out of evolutionary ability to consume, and by the 800s every other civilization in the world had set into decline. China had the least opportunity to decline because rice is simply a better crop than all other, right? And they're isolated, they're basically on an island, right? Whereas nobody else is in Eurasia, right? Africa, Eurasia is essentially on an island. Africa's on a trade island, but they're not on a war island, right? Europe is on a trade island and a war island, and America is on a trade island but not a war island, right? So excuse me, America is on neither a trade island nor a war island because we have, like England, control the seas. So my point here, or my multiple set of points here, is that there's a difference between the debts we can go into and correct for, i.e. pollution, borrowing, anything economic, right? And behavioral debts. Why? Because nature remains constant and man doesn't, because man is dependent on institutions, norms, traditions, metaphysics, and assumptions. So we can destroy those truths, even if we can't destroy the truths of the world. And we can devolve that information system that we're dependent upon, while we can't, because we don't understand that you're either reflecting the world and slowly insulating yourself from it so that you can go into debt. Because what is cooperation other than a continuous exchange of debts and credits, right? That's what trade is, debts and credits. So we can go into debts and credits within what we've created, within the insulation from the natural world we've created. So there are debts we can go into and recover from. There are debts that we can go into and not recover from. And there is war we can go into and recover from. And there is war we can go into and not recover from. What's the difference? The difference is what Hayek called we call social capital, which is social, political, and institutional capital, or what we today call metaphysical capital.
Yep.
The things we all depend on for cooperation at scale that we're unaware of. We can measure the physical world, we can measure pollution, but we don't measure bowling alone. If we measured bowling alone, we'd see why we're getting poorer. Because woke is destroying genetic, cultural, institutional, normative, and informational capital. And they're doing it on purpose, just like the Marxists did, because they're trying to devolve us to the state of the peasantry, where the state of the peasantry is the top and bottom against the middle, because natural aristocracy is a threat to the putting adaptive constraints on the top and the bottom. The top and the bottom must be pushed into the middle class ethics and of reciprocity in order to continue to provide returns on evolution. Once they see that capital, they try to live off that accumulated capital like a child lives off its parents, right? That's what they do. And so this whole system is us trying to push people into the middle class, meaning responsible, productive, non-parasitic, at least during the period of productivity, if not your youth and older years. But what the enemy is trying to do is to prevent paying the cost of adaptation into responsibility and productivity so that they can maximize their consumption of the existing physical and normative and behavioral and institutional capital. So that's the math of the whole fucking thing. It's just
That was beautiful, Kurt.
I don't know if how many people will follow. I think people can follow that.
I know. It's like the beauty of it is it can be rewound and watched until you understand.
Some people say they got to watch it 2 or 3 times to get it, but
That's okay.
I mean,
that's if you can get it, it's cheap at 3 times, because you can watch it at 1.5 times speed, so it only takes twice as long as it did to say it. If you watch,
I think the difference between what like Fukuyama is wrong in his conclusions, but right in his analyses. His history is really good. His prediction isn't. And the difference is that he sees trends like a stock market analyst analyzing fundamentals instead of evolutionary debits and credits like a behavioral economist. And so what I do is I don't make that mistake, is that I'm looking for accumulation of capital and destruction of capital. I'm looking for the pyramid. Yeah. And that capital can be created by only one means, suppression of basically reciprocity, responsibility, and productivity. Right? And it can only be destroyed by one means, irreciprocity, irresponsibility, and non-productivity. Well, people will say, but I can't compete in this world. Well, that's a problem of your government trying to create a single economy instead of 3 economies. For an economy for the natural aristocracy, an economy for the natural middle class, an economy for those the classes that can't be responsible for capital. And that's all it is. It's how much capital are you responsible for? Well, create an economy for the people that allows them to have the responsibility for the capital they can.
That's right.
And so, I mean, why did we end the WPA? Well, it underpaid. Did it underpaid? And yes, there was a tendency of people to look at the Work Products Association, the WPA, as people who were getting paid to sit around on their asses, the way we sort of criticize state construction workers. Right? Okay, well, they still produce great shit at a very low price. right? So, I mean, maybe that's the best those guys can do. Maybe their compensation is actually spending a lot of time sitting around in exchange for really low wages.
And
Okay,
that's okay.
that's fucking okay.
Because they're not being bad.
They're not being bad. They're being good. It's okay. I mean, I don't have any. I get mad when the guy's making 80K a year, with his fat ass out there waving a flag, right? That bothers me because he's a state union employee. But if he's a WPA employee, and the basic thing is we have to use 30 of them to do the job of 10, fine. They're contributing. Their pay is a compensation of low wage for a relaxing environment in which to use your physical body to perform work that if you actually worked at your capacity would cause a decline in the fitness and durability of your body over time. I don't see that as irreciprocal.
That's right.
I mean, I can think of a lot of guys. There are a lot of guys who, if they knew that they would be safe,
Yeah.
right? They would be happy to live in dorms, right? That cost them $600 a month, right? And
That's
drink
right.
beer. They would be fine. And you know what? They might probably eventually grow up. But we're not throwing these the
That's
number
right.
of guys I see that are burnt to a crisp by this system,
Yes, sir.
they're not wrong.
We're in agreement.
The stress they're under is not okay. I don't believe in giving them money. I don't like the social democrat nonsense because you have to give them a lot of money that way. But if you're giving them and you're not getting
That's right.
anything out
They're
of
not
them.
getting any exchange.
Whereas if you might be, they're probably doing less harm, and except that they tend to the drug use among them is.
No, they're doing other damage that you're not aware of.
Right. And the problem is you lose the ability to engage in social pressure, normative pressure, because they're outside the economic and social system.
Yeah, they
Whereas
have no constraint.
And secondly, it's really easy to disrespect them because they're not providing any value. But if you're providing value, we can subsidize a lot of people, to live simple lives, and they'll be perfectly fucking happy. Anyway, did I go off on a rant there?
A little bit.
You're laughing. You're giving me that face again.
Well, I'm like this. Because I wanted to refer to Steve Bannon because he named the name of the thing, which needs to be identified, the identity of the creature with which we are conflicting, which he called the administrative state.
Correct.
Which I expand. Jordan Hall calls
the managerial elite. Burnham's managerial elite. Bannon's calls them the administrative state. The tendency for us to have looked at Prussian bureaucracy, and tried to copy it like we copied German education, because it was the most sophisticated bureaucracy. The difference is those bureaucracies, the Prussian bureaucracies, were under monarchies.
Yeah.
Right? They were at the will. They were in the service of the state at the will of the state. In other words, the monarch. Right?
Right.
And secondly, they were from the military. So these people have been through Prussian education, which is basically military, Prussian military training, right? And they are in a privileged position, which they can be terminated at will by the state. So these are professionals. It's also small, right? I mean, if you look at it, and I love Frederick. He says, I don't think a lot, something like, I don't think a lot about my people. I leave them to their interests, and they leave me to mine. Which is a really obscure way of saying the purpose of the monarchy is the state. The purpose of the government is the people, the economy, and the purpose of the church is the people, right? Right. This is actually the right division of labor. But the minute you mix those things, you haven't got a judicial hierarchy of competency. Whereas the church is judging you on the morality, your behavior. Because the church did, and I mean, England is the best example because it's the most formal. The church could punish you for moral turpitude.
Yes.
When it fucking worked great. You went to the court and all the way up to you went to the court all the way up to the parliament for property. And the monarchy was large, and you could appeal to the monarchy as a judge of last resort if you felt unfairly treated. But the problem is each of the monarchy doesn't want to subvert the parliament and take on the work of doing its job. The parliament doesn't want to take on the case of the what call the cities, right? Or the cities don't want to take on the responsibility of the manors, right? And the church is the last line of responsibility because it's just moral. So you have all these courts of appeal. You have all this escalatory court of appeal where it's pretty hard to exhaust your right, your ability to get satisfaction or get a problem resolved, because you can go to the parliament saying we just need this over here, or the manor, or the church. You can go for them for positive or negative reasons.
If you failing all else, you can walk and go to another state.
Which the Germans did the best. There's no question the Germans did the best at that.
Now I will return to my original statement regarding the beta state, which is the beta state, which is the administrative state and the managerial state, elite, and the administrative state that Bannon talked about it's all the same thing, and it's why I think I understand it as a Babylonian control system. The beta state manages the matrix, the intellectual emotional matrix, which stabilizes the social construction, which is governed by the betas with enforcement by alphas. Except the betas see the alphas as disposable and seek to supplant, just to generate new ones instead of allowing
think men are disposable.
What's that?
It's part of the female cognition that's part of the beta cognition, which is they think that men are disposable because they think the order is gravity, or they think the order is natural. Whereas the order isn't. Any order that's order at all is, it's natural is war. War is natural. That's evolution in progress. The great thing about humans is, for some reason, despite being super predators, we've figured out how to bypass war through cooperation at different scales. And only war, war is common, right? It's the most common thing in human history. But we do an amazing job of avoiding it and using competition for mutually beneficial means as an alternative. We do a great job of it, and we do enough of that. It's hard to fight, hard to have.
My point being this is that what occurred is that the rebellion against the Prussian and English system was just betas, the betas, and the betas they've colonized here, and they've since the Civil War have generated this administrative state and the cathedral and the beta state here, as culminating in this woke nonsense that we now have, is the thing that is identified. I identify it as the beta state.
Well, I think there's two. Let's take two different avenues.
Yes.
Let's take two intersections. Because you're right, but conflating them there's a problem. So first of all, we have the avenue of the natural bureaucracies, which are monopolies, to self-service, to maximize. In other words, not only bureaucracies, but even large corporations. I mean, if you go, Microsoft is the company I know best.
Yes.
The problem is those organizations what occurs is the attempt for all people to maximize their gain. Right, so that's what happens.
That was garbled, I'm afraid. Please repeat yourself.
Your internet connection is unstable. That doesn't happen. Okay, the tendency of all people in all organizations to maximize rents. Right, so we're all trying to get paid more within this organization, and the management's team is to try to retain an equilibrium between the profit of employees, a profit for shareholders, the profit for owners, right? I mean, those are two different investors, right? Then owners, and executives, and so they can maintain the incentives necessary to continue to be able to survive, to take advantage of opportunities and survive shocks in the market.
Right.
It's what happens is most companies maximize rents to the point where they lack the capital and the willingness to lose profits. And so they double down on the innovator's dilemma, which is they are outcompeted because the accumulated bureaucracy. I know as a consultant, one of my primary jobs is usually that to identify what loyalties exist in the organization that are frictions. One of the things Microsoft was very, very good at it is constant reorganization. So you can't develop political loyalties. What happened as a consequence is that something almost as bad, which is in the absence of loyalties, you have everybody trying to be the head that sticks up. And so you have the wrong kind of people float to the top. They thought it was good, and it was only good while it was good. It eventually stopped being good. I can't tell you how many meetings I've been in over there where what I'm watching is the loud asshole take over the meeting when he's wrong, and there may not, and that the loudest the loud asshole can win as long as there's nobody smart enough in the room in real time who can decompose his argument. So I mean, there you lose. It's like in the bureaucracy, you always lose. I don't know how to describe this.
Because they can't win. It's a loser.
You can't win there's no winning the game.
That's why I think that the organization of missions with discrete parameters and plans for dissolution is essential.
Correct. I always say this, and my software does this, is you should organize your company by projects, not responsibilities. And so you always have a beginning, a middle, of an end, and then you're continuously reorganizing the business. And what you'll find is that groups of people who are extremely competent will stick together in solving certain kinds of problems. Right. And so that's how I ran my
find that they will sort themselves based on utility to the project. And
themselves, because what they're
loyalty,
right. So I found that, and the other thing is that it's like I would always get picked last in everything except dodgeball. So I'm the smallest guy. So I don't mind. It just is like I'm smaller than these guys. What can I say? I will absolutely positively hit the softball into the outfield. I mean, I will not miss the softball, and you will have a very hard time hitting me with a dodgeball. But I mean, if it comes to the rest of the sports, so anyway, I was trying to make a joke. I was trying to make a joke out of a serious thing.
That worked. I like it.
And so what happens is people in these organizations, which is something Microsoft did do well, they tend to float to the bottom too. In other words, it's easy when you have a lot of reorganization. It's easier for people in a project-based organization. People float to the bottom. Now, the people who make what's the stuff you rip apart there? Velcro. They are, of course, the people that did the best. They're the canonical example of small organizations. And I thought Dell was a great company back in the day, who brought over the Japanese method of working in small teams. or there's, this has gone all over the place now. Unfortunately, we've got robots now, and that's like sort of, but a small team is where people can substitute and it's more interesting, and you can develop friendships. But teams, it's very easy to expose a failure on a team that's small. Whereas in a bureaucracy, there's lots of room
Shadow.
for accumulating idiots, losers, failures, or whatever. Because what happens in a bureaucracy is work expands to fill all available time. So what happens is you end up hiring, there's really 3 persons worth of work in a 10-person organization, right? Because you hire a person for a responsibility that isn't a full-time job, right? Which then becomes a full-time job because it's been filled with whatever. And who gives the great example? Oh, is it Buffett? I can't remember if it's Buffett buying the train company. Anyway, I think it's Buffett. I want to say it's Buffett, not.
Yeah, he bought the Northern rail lines. I don't remember the name of them.
Anyway, he said, except the problem is it's it's just not a Buffett. I'm confusing this. I don't think it's Buffett. Anyway, they make rail cars.
Oh,
anyway,
cars. Okay.
The rail cars. And so he said, there's this big building with 700 people in New York, and I can't figure out what they do. I've been in this position, by the way. I've been going into looking at a company, and like, as far as I can tell, nobody does anything useful here. Right. In this whole, right. I've bought companies where whole departments I'm like,
I don't know what you're doing.
Well, they know what they're doing. They just have given themselves the illusion that it's valuable.
They're not adding value though. It's like, okay, that's interesting.
And then, and so, you go in there, and of course you buy the company knowing that you've got to fix this problem, right? Of course, the way I look at it is, it might be a cost of doing business, might be letting it die of its own, that the group die of its own volition. But another way is, I'm not a big believer in the maximization of visual measurements of changes in capital is as important as measuring the seen and unseen changes in capital. In other words, there's natural processes do a better job than managerial. In other words, just provide the people. It's like when I was a kid, my first company, we put out this report, and I said, and she's the owner of the company showing the report. I'm like, just give it to fucking everybody. He's like, well, why? I'm like, because I know you don't think this is an older Jewish guy, which is, of course, someone I love dearly, but is typical for our cultural differences. And he says, because the truth is that if people understood how little profit we were making, these businesses make 4%, 5%. If they would be a lot more careful about what they did. And of course, we increased our profits by almost a third, just by letting people understand
the margins are small.
The margins are small, and this is where you're making it and not. And I'm like, just give people the information. And I'm in the place of my software that I developed back in the past, is you give people the information necessary to make the decision. Right? I mean, that's all you have to do. And so if you give people the information, then it's the same thing that happens today. If taxpayers saw their current account, right, with the government, in other words, you've paid this much in total taxes, but you've consumed this much in total resources, almost all of us would be underwater. There isn't be a single woman that wasn't underwater. I mean, there would be a single woman, but I mean, there's not.
Maybe 4.
It'd be right. I mean, the only people that actually are net contributors to taxes are white men over 35. Everybody else is a deadweight, is a cost, right? It's being paid for by them. And so you sort of look at this and say, well, wow, would people act differently if they knew that? Of course they would. You don't have to.
They would vote differently, probably.
They would vote differently. If you said, we're going to take
a tax report with you get a tax report with with whatever it is that the government tells you with your tax findings, right? Tax report. Right. I like that.
Now, if you could vote for a city initiative But there's certain things you can't get out of, like sewage and power, right? You
right.
have to
Essential
distribute
services.
that, right? But I lived in Redmond, and they built this Redmond, Washington, right, which is where Microsoft is based, right? So there's an excess of extortive capital available to Redmond
Right.
government, and so they built this new city hall, and it pissed me off because it was a lot of fucking money. Now, if you could vote for individual expenditures,
Oh, right. So
right,
it's exorbitant.
right. Now, the difference is some people, and of course, in that time, you got to understand Redmond, right? It's like Microsoft gave more of its money to its employees than all companies, other companies in history combined, right? I mean, that's why I love them, right? I mean, I love Microsoft for a bunch of reasons, even though I make fun of them all the time. But if you could vote for where your dollars went, most of us would be a lot happier. Because I could say, well, you're the idiot that paid for that shit. I didn't, And then you could have a balance sheet, like what your taxes went to, and then you've signed up to pay for that goddamn thing. Well, you've signed up to pay for that goddamn thing. Well, people would behave a lot differently. Now, I'm not necessarily saying we should go to these extremes. I'm saying that the problem is people have no idea that other people pay for them, everything, that their contributions. Likewise, if I was a working class guy, I'm thinking of a specific group of individuals, and I was burning my physical body, right, by the time I was 45, right, and I'm getting taxed, and I have to calculate my own taxes,
Oh my.
right, and I'm at risk all the time because I've got to play this sole proprietorship game of predicting my taxes and whatever, right? If I'm in that game, I'm like, well, first of all, if that guy knew that the end result is he shouldn't be paying any taxes at all because the healthcare, I mean, he shouldn't be paying any taxes at all, right? Because it's actually his net contribution to taxation is nothing, and we're putting him through a great deal of hell for absolutely no reason. Whereas if we got rid of that, the number, I mean, there's a point at which, I mean, some of these electricians and welders, I mean, they make, you can make 200-300 grand a year if you work at it. It's certainly $100,000 a year job. I mean, there's a point at which you want to start taxing people, but taxing these people who make 50, 60, 70, 80 grand a year, who work with their bodies. Whereas, we got those of us who work with our brains, and our basic problem is our asses get flat.
Right.
I mean, we're suffering from hemorrhoids, and they're suffering from back problems and nerve problems. And so it's just not okay to tax people at the same rate based on and especially when it doesn't fucking matter. They don't matter.
It doesn't add value to the
it doesn't move the needle. It's a purely political thing. It's like we have this thing of no taxation without representation that's spread its way through the economy. Well, I mean, first of all, it isn't clear that you should have. It's like the core via negativa representation, right? In other words, you have the court available to you.
Yeah.
If you had the court available to you, you would do better than you would by voting.
Yes.
In other words, if you had the hierarchy of appeals, if your local person actually had the ability, your local representative had the ability to do something for you, they don't.
Right.
Then it might be one thing. But they don't. They don't have that ability anymore. You have to go through the court system, and it's the court tries to keep you out rather than the politician tries to keep you happy. Right? These are two different things. So we just fuck people all the time. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm like, okay, I could continue on this fucking rant for forever, but the idea is coming across. We just are not.
What's that?
We're not running an empirical government.
Right. So the issue that I'm gonna bring it back and tie it together in a nice little bow here for the audience is the The empirical government Kurt is advocating is alpha state,
Yes.
which is ethical and
Empirical.
empirical and in coherence with the natural law. And as opposed to the socially constructed state that is governed by empathy and not correspondent with reality, that is momentarily advantageous to the people who would remain in charge.
Yeah, I would put it differently. Empathizing is a great way of lying,
Yes.
right? Empathizing is a great way of lying. And so, whereas if my thing is, I have a lot more respect for ordinary people than I think the people in the government do. And that's because the problem for ordinary people is they lack the information, the truthful information, the necessary for them to have an informed opinion. And so that they go by what information they trust, which is people like them. People like them just develop complaints. And so, because they're powerless, so they have to develop complaints. So, I mean, if people had access to the court, access to representatives who could actually make a difference, right? If we gave people the information necessary, well, I mean, Nancy, I know what you're saying, but there's a whole lot of people paying for your quality of life. And I go back to the working guy. I mean, if you get that guy says, well, yeah, but I don't pay any fucking taxes. I mean, you have a different status attached to the working class now, right? Yeah. Then you go down to, I mean, it becomes attractive, right? Those people get like basically a 30% raise for nothing. Or then you go down to like the people who say, well, it's unfair. I mean, is it unfair? Is it unfair? That those rich people, they pay for you, You're sitting here sitting on rich people, but the rich people, it's maybe true, but the rich people, what you consider rich people, which is basically upper middle class, they pay for you.
I want to interject here a little bit because it's like what's interesting because it's like the beta state is governed by the credentialed who falsely believe themselves to know things that they don't.
Correct.
And this
that's the axis we were on. Oh,
I tried to keep you on track, brother.
You
mentioned the one avenue and you went down that road hard, buddy. But it is like the credentialed think they know stuff, falsely believe themselves to be knowledgeable in things of which they are certainly ignorant.
Credentialism is the primary problem. Is that we have built especially in the post-war era, the belief that the managerial state members can be educated into position rather than to demonstrate competency sufficient to fulfill a position.
There you have
it. So the problem is there's only two criteria available. The two criteria available are for demonstrated competency are military and economy. And so if you look at how many people in the military and the economy used to be in a cabinet versus today, there's nobody. And Obama was the bottom. Obama administration was the bottom of competency. And it's true. I mean, I'm not making that up.
We're doing better now then, is what you're suggesting?
Well, I don't know this, but I mean, who's done? I'm trying to think. I know somebody's looked at this. It's not coming to me.
Okay.
I remember the work on Obama. Because Obama was the peak of incompetence, right? And I know that these people have said that it was Came Laffer, but I can't remember who did the work.
I would say the current administration challenges that notion hard.
That's not true because they're basically continued Trump's policies, almost entirely. All this administration has done is put a nicer face on Trump's policies, and that in itself is the real insight. is that that means at least foreign policy, excuse me. Domestically, Trump is far better. I mean, for the economy, for everything. But Trump's problem is that we like him, we're conservatives, because he uses the left's means of argument. He uses all these sorts of baiting into hazard to create a social discourse, and they hate that we're using it. Right? They hate that he's using it. It's because he's disempowering them by using their technique against them. And we sit here laugh, of course, because we know what he's doing, and they get angry because they consider him as being dishonest. We're like, they don't know they're dishonest.
They don't know they're dishonest.
They don't know they're dishonest.
Which goes to the credentials. The credentialed class believe themselves to know something that they don't.
Right, and they believe they're moral when they're not. This is the female
problem. False belief of morality.
Oh, it's the female intuition, which is what most of our credentialists and betas have. They have the female. The reason they've been selected for, and is that, and you can see this in college admissions, is that men don't go to college because they can't tolerate the falsehood, whereas women go to college. In other words, the only reason men can go to college is to get into STEM classes, which is more resistant to woke. But even now, I talk to people today that's like, well, you wouldn't believe the woke that's coming out of even the computer science organizations today. So,
all right. So we're going to moral outrage here, because this is the line that distinguishes the alpha state from the beta state, moral outrage. And it is like we're approaching moral outrage. We're going to Mar-a-Lago. See, this Mar-a-Lago thing is this approach of moral outrage, because this is the unprecedented crossing of the Rubicon with this behavior this week.
Well, it's also constructed. So we know what's happening is they keep using what are called in law as constructions. They're using they're committing illegal acts under what's called the color of law.
Yes.
And so the problem is that since the left is emotionally satisfied, not rationally satisfied. In other words, they'll use any excuse to satisfy their emotions, which is what women do, right? There's no consistency to the female method of cognition. It's just to satisfy its arguments. They collect in a bunch of playing cards to satisfy whatever things. Now, it's not that all people don't do it, but women do false ones, right? Or the female, not women, the feminine mind does. I'm trying to fix that. Feminine mind does the false ones.
I'm sorry, I'll try to correct you myself in addition.
So what you see is how do we say it? They're using the color of law to create a construction.
Yeah.
Just so this is important. The relationship between social construction, in other words, all this lying that they do.
Yes.
Right. And legal construction is the same.
Yes.
What they're doing is they're creating they're using the law to achieve an immoral end, which is to prevent him from running again. Because if he runs again and he wins, which it looks like he's going to,
he will win.
He will destroy their careers because they're immoral. Except by being immoral, they're justifying the reason by which he wants to destroy their institutions and replace them, because these institutions are immoral. Now, I said this yesterday, and people didn't understand. I said, this is why you want a monarchy. The monarchy is above the law in the restoration of the law. In other words, what that means is they're above any construction in order to restore it. That's what it means. So that you can create legislation and claim it's law, but the monarchy is above that legislation in the restoration of the law. Elizabeth still has this right. If we had a king, then we could go to the king and say, whatever. The problem is we don't have a king, so we have to have a revolution.
We have sovereignty of the individuals that's what we have.
So
it goes to the core of Western civilization. This is how I describe this. It's very simple. So give me a moment if you'll be so forgiving. The core of Western civilization is a nut, and it is like this. It's based on this premise of organized violence. And we parse out our violence in two manners. On the right, we parse out our differences. We settle our differences in a civil way by ballot. Otherwise, we do it by bullet. And what occurred to me when the Roe v. Wade thing came out was these knuckleheads in the beta class are dumb enough to choose the bullet because they refuse to allow the ballot to take place.
Isn't that just feminine shit test? Is that
Like,
they can't perceive we do limits, right? That's what we think. We don't think about conservatism as a constraint based thinking, right?
that's constraint-based thinking.
Right.
So
So
identify that a little bit more closely for
it's a when conservatives use hyperbola, if everyone did that, it would lead to whatever.
Right.
That's they're saying the constraint therefore is this
limit. Right.
Right. We think in terms of limits.
Yeah.
Anything within limits is fine. Right now, we may vary in what those limits are.
Right.
Right. So some Christians say, well, the limit is that you've got to believe in Jesus Christ, our Lord, Savior. The guy like me would say, well, you've got to just stick with the natural law, anything within the natural laws. But these are statements of limits. They're not statements of what you need to do. Right. Right.
So via negativa.
They're via negativas. Whereas the left lives in a world of opportunities. What can I get away? So they live in the world of positivas. So the thing is, they don't see limits, they see oppression.
Yes.
Whereas we see limits beyond which harm is created. Right.
Hey,
and we see them as immoral.
They are immoral. They don't have
moral. No, I understand that. This is what I mean. One of the things I don't like is my conclusion is turns out they're wrong. Right? It's like women are right to the scale at which they're right, which is their children, their neighbors' children, other women's children, but they're wrong after that.
Well,
right? And so my problem is it turns out that we're right and they're wrong, and there isn't really anywhere to go with it.
Well, the issue that I'm going back to, which is this diamond, the beta state seeks to be universal and has to eliminate the alpha state, or it has to oppress it in order for it to exist. Otherwise, there's a place to defect to for those people who have merit.
Yes. So let me.
I'm not done. I'm not done. I'm going to say the alpha state is defined by the distinction of moral outrage, which we are at the point of, and I will illustrate this by telling you the conversation that has occurred in Arizona, in which the people in Maricopa County responsible for elections are getting this phone call. It's not 2020, excuse me. It's not 2020. Make sure you're careful how you count the ballots. And it's the line is drawn firmly and brightly. There you have it. That moral outrage is what has occurred. We are at the point of moral outrage among the alphas in this country.
Okay, so that's true. Scott, a couple of people disagree with you. I agree with you. That's because I have contact with the people who are most likely to pull a trigger.
Ich verstehe.
So but I want to take it back to we're talking about this problem, which is we see the limits and they see oppression.
Yes.
Right. And we see them as immoral and they see us as immoral. But we're just here's the wall between us and nature. And your limit of your consumption has to stay within here, because otherwise you're not consuming, you're decapitalizing. And that's the line you can't cross.
That's correct.
So, eating what you produce is great. Eating the stores is not.
Yes.
Right. So let's put this let's tie this all the way back to physics. So when you say, we say this is important. Let's see if I can succeed at this.
Yes.
We systematize, so we see limits.
Yeah.
They empathize. So they see wants and opportunities.
Yeah.
Right. So if you can't systematize, can you see limits? No. So therefore, what is the only limit?
What's available?
And then who's limiting you? Us. Men, conservatives, whatever. So it's important. Where there's nowhere for the left, the feminine mind, to store the information about limits. There's no way to see it or store it.
Wait. Why is that?
Well, they can't see it.
They can't.
See it, so they can't store it. It's important.
Oh, that's a weird premise. I'm trying to wrap my head
Well,
around.
because I'll tie it back to physics. We have a difference between A and B. In other words, the left and the right, the positive and the negative. The positive male is accumulating capital.
Right.
The negative female is trying to pull it back to neutral ground by consumption. That's what the universe does, right?
Right.
And what happens is we discover a stable relation,
right,
in which the energy is preserves a new relation. How can the negative understand positive?
which is funny.
Wait a minute, it's important. It's the competition between the two that determines the stable relation. The thing is, the sexes are just representing cognitively what, it's this, we try to do this all the time. There's one fucking law to the universe. So when we say women are shit testing, what does that mean?
They're seeing what they can get away with.
Well, they can't see any other limit.
Okay.
All right. So they're trying to
they're seeking to determine what the limit is.
Because that's the maximum stable relation. The problem, so right, then if men are saying men are stealing and robbing and murdering and whatever, that's them imposing on the stable relation too, right? I mean, so the stable relation is only the competition between the limits, which is the conservatives, and the demands, which is the feminine, or the progressive left. So it's not bad that they want to consume. It's bad that we don't limit them. It's bad that we don't maintain the relationship between the universe and the people who can't see the limits. I can't empathize the way women can, especially across so many domains. I can't do that. I mean, my wife could keep every wife I've had can keep 1,000, there's not enough ketchup for next week. I can't keep that in my fucking head. The next thing I'll do is I'll notice that I go to put ketchup on my hamburger and I'm running out, and if I'm lucky, I'll write it down. I need to get ketchup.
If you have a system in place, right?
Well, it's every guy and every child asks the woman, "Where's my what?" And they fucking know. It's creepy to us, right? But imagine the woman's mind has all that shit in it. Right? I mean, they actually have all that stuff in there. So that's a present quantitative, not a future qualitative. And so they're always working with all this stuff. And we wonder why they like shopping. It's the same fucking instinct.
Ready for this?
What?
It's because it's they know where everything in the shop is and how much its actual value is, and when it's on good deals, it's okay, and whether or not they need it and whether or not they will need it or want it. Okay, the representation of the difference between the feminine and the masculine goes down to this.
Well, yeah, that's the whole argument, right? I mean, it's the same fucking thing.
But what's interesting is this is the same symbology in the statues of Ishtar.
Oh, you're doing it again.
Fertility and the rod of punishment.
I thought it looked like a vagina and a dick, if you ask me.
It's the same damn thing. You said, well, how's it different?
I was just trying to facilitate the
That was for the guys, just to
For
get a
guys.
laugh. I know. Was that a useful conversation about the betas and the alphas and the and
I
the
just don't know if I got I mean, we say this all the time. The reason the triangular method works, it's a means for you to sort a problem, disambiguate a problem into first principles. And the reason, and we have to look at the world as, how do you know anything? You know something by adversarial competition between opportunities and costs. That's how you know something. And so all knowledge is the result of adversarialism. But we specialize in order to find limits. Now, women are looking for the limit of hyperconsumption, and men are looking for the limit of hypercapitalization, because these are the reproductive strategies of men and women. We need the tribe to persist against all other tribes and against the universe. They want their children and other children to persist, despite the limits that the males of the universe press upon them. And so they live by impulse within the moment and try to maximize consumption. We don't. We live by systematizing in order to make sure to forecast in time. Now, are some women more masculine and some women more? Of course. I mean, that's what a fucking beta is, right? It's a man with a female mind. He's putting approval and social facility over responsibility and capital accumulation.
Social proofs.
So, right, he's looking for social justification, reward, because he's not producing either productivity or defense or force. So, I mean, that's what we do. I mean, it's so simple, and we can't expect people to be other than they are. We can only develop institutions that allow us to maximize the identification of opportunities for cooperation, despite the necessary difference between the female and the male, because it's that necessary difference that keeps us evolving towards higher capitalization and higher consumption. And the satisfaction of higher consumption by higher capitalization is what produces evolutionary progress, just like it does between molecules, cells, and entire complex organisms, and ecologies, and the whole fucking planet. I mean, it's just a simple, ordinary algorithm expressed at all levels.
Right.
Can we pause so I can get a bagel?
Yeah, of course, Kurt. I'm pausing right. Here we are. We're back again with fresh coffee, Kurt.
Thank you for letting me get a bagel. Well, actually, a toast and peanut butter and a coffee bread. That was my bread. So I had an allergy night last night, so I set my alarm for 10:45, and Brad and I come on at 11, right? And so I set my alarm for 10:45, and I got up and I brushed my hair and brushed my teeth and washed my face and put this shirt on and
and your judge's robe
and my judge's robe, and made myself a cup of coffee, but I didn't get time to eat something, so I got a little dizzy there. Anyway, so Brad, what do we got a lot? There's so much going. I lost the train of thought during the original first
little bit.
No, it wasn't a little bit. It was a lot lost train of thought. But anyway, it was a good bit. So let's go on to. We have a couple of other things we want to talk a little more about, I guess.
Right. So I'll introduce it. Where we were on about the beta state, and I had mentioned that the alpha males are to the point of moral outrage. They are to the point of moral outrage, which is the non-cooperation. The point of non-cooperation. We're not.
I don't know what that means. I know an awful lot of people that just want to start pulling triggers.
That's non-cooperation in
okay.
I
just want to make sure we were talking about the same thing.
Well, there's non-cooperation, but it's like the issue is moral outrage, and it's like they're ready, and they're non-coop. They're at this point they don't regard the federal government as being occupied by beta enemy state.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, and the only recourse they have is ballot or bullet. And they're like, you're refusing to allow us ballot. So therefore, the only solution left is bullet. And it's like, that is the trigger warning, right? We're at moral outrage. and increasingly
If,
so.
if the BLM protests hadn't stopped,
Yeah.
it would have, and I think that's what.
So we were, the purpose of it is that the moral outrage is exacerbated by the crossing of the Rubicon, which was the gates of Mar-a-Lago.
I think we covered this already, but I don't, I've said this a million times. I can tell you where things will likely go. The field of opportunity, the field of potential is where things will largely go.
Okay.
It is, that's how I work, and I've been pretty accurate so far. A lot has changed over the past 2 years,
Yes.
and so I'm no longer confident that I have a vision is the wrong word, sounds esoteric. I mean, I don't have a set of predictions that are very clear right now. And the reason is the external factors are now more influential than the internal.
What does that mean?
The weakness of the Biden administration has emboldened who I said it would, which was China, Russia, and Iran.
Right.
To the point where the external causes and the consequences for the economy are now such that they change the field. The field of possibilities is much broader.
So the restraints,
The constraints on the field of possible futures is
weakened, yeah.
is weakened. So the spectrum of, and this isn't always negative in that sense, is that my argument was that the economy would be the thing that would end tolerance. And so I think that's beginning to occur. I think that the contravening influence is that national security tends to counter internal frictions.
I want to ask you what you mean by tolerance.
Well, I mean, the right is just at the point where they're, the water's up to here, and before you start doing something. Now, what we saw when, BLM is writing and Antifa is creating, this is an organized, I know people don't want to say this, but I'm sorry, it's true, is it is a paid for sponsored insurrection, and we know who's paid for and sponsored. And so that started to lead to shooters. And so that was that was destructive for both parties' agendas. So what's happened, interestingly, is that they're doubling down on undermining an elected president, right? And undermining, in other words, they're doubling down on undermining Trump.
Trump,
right?
specifically Mr. Trump.
And this has never happened before. It's possible that it's not happened before just because it hasn't been a case where frequently a case where the president's left, had a term off and then come back, and right. So that's a possibility, but in general, part of our balance of powers is that you don't prosecute presidents once they've left office because they no longer have power, and because the dangers of being in that job, it's too dangerous to put people in a position where we can be prosecuted afterwards. It will create behaviors during the presidency that are deleterious to the
Well, it's like
Diversity.
the issues that I would bring up regarding this line of conversation is that the incomplete or the addressing via color of law of the complaints of improprieties in the last election cycle in 2020 that have failed to be properly addressed by the judiciary is a problem, which casts some question as to the legitimacy of the presidency of Mr. Biden, has not been addressed and is not going to likely to be addressed under the current administration by any means at all.
Okay, first, it might be a job for justice, but it's not a job for the judiciary.
Okay, I will take that correction without
Okay.
reservation.
There should have been and a group of people that went out and did it formally and gave us solid empirical evidence. My
Been
understanding,
resisted at every turn.
right? However, the problem with the voting is that I hope I'm going to get really abused for this. While there were inconsistencies, meaning frauds, they don't appear to have been large enough to produce the outcome that we see, that I know of, right?
What outcome do you know of?
In other words, the only thing I am worried about is the machines. All right, every other thing seems to have produced enough, has been able to produce vote harvesting and farming those things don't appear to have been enough to really undermine the election. And I could be wrong, but I haven't.
So you would be classified as agnostic on that particular subject matter, it sounds like.
I'm a scientist. I'm a judge.
And you have not seen evidence that would
I
cause
have
you
not
to
seen
decide.
evidence to cause me to be able to make a decision.
I see.
Right. I'm
fair
willing
enough.
to see either
But there's
outcome.
an ambiguity there there is ambiguity there. Is that not
There
fair?
is fraud there. Democrats have been doing fraud time immemorial.
Wait. I want to backtrack that a little bit and correct you a little bit, because I regard the Rhino Republicans in the same light as I regard the Democrats.
Well, I know, but
regard them
we're
as
talking
utterly
about
different.
electioneering fraud is a long-term, consistent
Yes.
problem in the Democratic Party, right?
Well, I wouldn't limit it, but yes, okay.
There is very little evidence of voting fraud among Republicans because we don't need to. In other words, anyway, there's no value in increasing the number of voters. So this for the Republicans. All right, so that's
I'm okay. I don't agree with that, but I'll allow it to stand without reservation.
okay. So my argument would be that the government failed. There's two basic arguments. The government failed to adequately investigate the question and deliver sufficiently empirical findings of sufficient scope that they could recommend, and there's a reason they didn't, and then settle the matter for the public in a way that allowed for us to accept the results on one hand, which I think we would be forced to at this point. And the second thing is that we would have been, however, the reason they didn't do that is because they didn't want to have that produce reforms. In other words, the reason they didn't investigate it is because the results of the investigation would have required the implementation of reforms. So that's really why they didn't investigate it.
There was a rumor, and I don't know. I think it to be true, which is that the case was presented to the Supreme Court by Texas, alleging that the irregularities in Pennsylvania were sufficient to cause the election to be questionable, and the Supreme Court was behind closed doors. The justices were behind closed doors, and it was the only time that the Chief Justice was overheard to be yelling at the other justices about the social implications of listening to the case, which is to say,
yeah, of course, he said that didn't happen.
I understand, and I'm just saying it. That's why I couched it as a rumor.
Right. It doesn't matter. We
Right.
know they had the discussion, whether it was, some fantasy liberal fascination with thinking emotion has some merit among people in the judiciary. It doesn't. The fact that whether the conversation was emotional or not has to do with, when I was trying to make my point over a bunch of other voices, my voice escalates too. Right? It's the same fucking thing. So
not an argument.
It's just normal. So
no, I agree. But right. it's
no, you're missing the point. The point is the discussion was had.
Yes.
Now, and the reason now you just saw the judiciary come out, realize I am very conscious of what the Supreme Court is trying to correct. I understand their mission. I know what went wrong. I know how they're looking at things at a strategic level. Their view is they're the only legitimacy left in the government, and therefore they're going to restore legitimacy to the judiciary, whether the public and the politicians like it or fucking not, because right now they're the last line of defense. All right, so that's how they're thinking about it. So they came out with Roe v. Wade, right? We thought this was going to be a catastrophe. It wasn't. Why? Because all I did is said it's a fucking question for the states. And we've already had the states double down on this issue. And it turns out this is going to be solved just like people want it to be, differently in different states. Right? So they're saying that we didn't have the right to make that decision. What they're saying,
who's they?
The court.
The court said the court does not have the right to be involved in the decision making process. Yes.
Now, the second thing is that that when they looked at this question, the court has a question of, are we responsible for this? Will this destroy our legitimacy?
Yes.
So the court is saying, if we get involved in this, we can't fucking win. Right? We cannot make in other words, remember, I focus this on concurrent, common, settled law.
Okay.
The court is trying to produce settled law.
Right.
If the court had made a decision, would it have resulted in settled law? No. Because nobody would have agreed with it either way. In other words, they couldn't have settled a dispute. The reason, and so the second thing is, if the court views this as the legislature's responsibility. In other words, you set up the game, you run the game, you pay for the consequences of the game, and if the game doesn't work, fix your own fucking game.
Wait, but I will state that it is my understanding that the Supreme Court is going to hear the case in the fall. So the case about Texas versus Pennsylvania.
Right, but now we're out of
that's right. Point. So so it was at that time it was too dangerous for us to hear it, and now we're going to engage, which
correct.
It's fundamentally.
The court is not going to interfere in an election. If you guys fucked up running it, then fix your fuck up. The price you pay for the fuck up is with the price you pay. But we're not going to cover your asses. That's what the court is saying.
Right.
Fix your fucking problem. Because if you make it our problem, it's not going to result in settled law. So the answer was...
but see, this is the same thing with Roe v. Wade. It's not settled law. Go figure it out.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
No, we're
saying the same thing. So this is why I gave a talk, made a big point of this a couple of weeks ago when I talked about the importance of understanding why I'm adding concurrent.
I like that.
To the common natural law is because people don't with the word common law has taken on a new meaning because the common law is usually compared to the continental law.
Yes.
And so that's a false dichotomy. If we look, the common law is ancient,
Yeah.
just like and so the once I bring in concurrency in it, that solves the problem of this
The
of
ancient
common.
nature of it.
Not only the ancient nature of it, but when you say common, it implies it implies we're all equal. But when you bring concurrent in, the concept of concurrency requires that all classes and regions, right? All regions and classes all agree that this is settled. So we don't have a democracy. We have a concurrent democratic republic, meaning that the purpose of voting is to identify whether a matter is settled concurrently among all people. This is a prohibition on activist law. In other words, if you can't make the people vote for it, it's not law yet. It's not ready to become law. That's what that means. The people don't get to vote on what are fundamental rights because despite what the left thinks, fundamental rights are simply natural rights, obligations, and inalienations. But those are facts of science. Those are science, right? The public doesn't have an opinion. They have an opinion over reality. Reality just exists, right? Right.
They get to have an opinion. It just doesn't have any register any value.
Now, common is a local effect, right? Right.
Okay, so it's a determination of local effect, commonality.
So when you say something is a common law, it means your province and my province and that little micro state over there and that city state and that whatever. We've all identified this via negativa way of resolving differences. This is important. Via negativa way of resolving differences.
Okay, please, for the audience, tell us what that means.
It means you've found this empirically discovered a conflict, and over time, all different courts among all different people have come to a common resolution of how to resolve that, a common consensus in the law of how to resolve that conflict.
But how to prevent it?
How to resolve it. It's important.
Okay.
The common law creates law by discovery of causes and remedies for disputes. It's trial and error science.
Right.
That's what common law means.
Okay.
Trial and error science by test of tort.
Right.
Concurrency is a via positiva.
Yes.
That means that we all have to agree to make something legislation.
Okay.
That's positiva.
I see. Okay. But the via negativa of the common law is.
So concurrency is the via positiva side of the coin, and commonality is the via negativa. We want this via positiva. We have discovered this via negativa. But in neither case is the state dictating. If you look at the state's dictates in history, they're almost always either two things: the resolution of disputes or the raising of funds.
Right.
That's it. Right. So there's whereas in the French model, they give out authoritatively what you may do and may not do. We don't do.
Or what you must do.
Right. We say, here's what you must not do. This develops a norm that you must not do. Right. And then when we want to get to a positiva, we require the same commonality. We just call that commonality via positiva voting, right? Because a jury's a vote and an election is a vote. These are negative. Who's to blame and what do we want? These are the two sides of the coin.
Right, but there's so I'm gonna I'm going to reflect this back at you just so that I'm certain I understand, and maybe it will help the audience. Concurrency allows us to test a via positiva manner of developing a law before it becomes common.
Let's go elections. Voting are a jury. The difference is the jury, right? The voters
Okay.
are deciding that they desire this.
Perfect.
And that's to produce legislation. Let's separate legislation from law.
Yes.
So the voters decide on what shall be legislation. That's right.
Yes.
The market for disputes decides law. Dispute resolution.
That's the court.
That's the court.
And so the via negativa of the court is it turns into a norm, and then it will eventually be a moral function in the society and a natural inhibition because you know better than to do that.
Right. And a concurrent vote among classes and regions says that, hey, it turns out that people actually want this. Or there's it's the same thing as in other words, it's where you become accepting to a via negativa and you demonstrate a want for a via positiva. So legislation is a positive assertion.
Yes.
And, right. Now, what we tend to do is we mix these. It's possible to look at a body of law and to create a standard of system and measurement. In other words, that's what I'm using this term all the time.
Okay.
A standard of weights and measure for the resolution of disputes by legislating a code.
Okay.
But that's just a way of saying, well, we're just looking at these various things and we're saying, okay, let's identify what's common and put it in here, right? So, but in the event, there's still a difference between that which was discovered by the resolution of disputes and that was legislated as a desire to bring about an opportunity.
Okay, so I want to clarify this a little bit just to make sure that I understand it. Okay.
I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing wrong.
You're not doing anything wrong.
Okay.
I'm just making sure that I understand it correctly.
Okay.
Well, it's like this, and I think it will help the audience. You're doing nothing wrong, Kurt. The issue of legislation is a preference of the polity, which they seek to bring about in the society at large, which is to say it's not completely adopted, that habit, the norm, and the potential moral functionality in the general public, because we disagree, some of us still. And we are attempting to create that as a norm in our society via legislation and eventually via common law, perhaps.
Usually usually legislation is financial. I want to clear this important distinction. Most legislation is about the use of resources to produce commons, right? That's important. We don't usually conflict over that. What we conflict over is this moral question. In other words, moral questions. Well, we're trying to take a thing that hasn't been resolved in court or which is undecidable. I make a big deal over the fact that homosexuality and abortion are not decidable. They're only choosable. And so these are questions that can only be solved by concurrency. In other words, the concurrent, meaning class and regional acceptance of something. So your job as a politician, if you want something, is to sell the population on this sufficient to obtain concurrency across classes and regions. So that's why we have like the House of Representatives is directly elected. The Senate was elected by the states, and the president is elected by the Electoral College. It's not to produce what you want. It's to produce concurrency. It's to produce the maximum average of what people want. And why? Because it's there to prevent people from fashion, what they call the fashions of the people.
Right.
Because people, we get excited. We're like fish or birds. And I like to use fish better because they're easy to understand. We're like fish. We swarm.
Yeah.
We school to opportunities. We break off for new ones and come back together. And so the fashions of the people are a danger. And so the problem with well,
I would say it reminds me of the book entitled "The Madness of Crowds."
well, it's exactly that.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, the you know, I mean, it's the great example in economics is if you ask 100 economists the answer to the question, and you ask 100 random people on the street, the 100 random people on the street are more likely to be correct. This is the problem of precise knowledge in any psychological or social science.
I like that you got to diss on the credentialed class again. Even that was a backhanded way to get there.
Well, it's funny. I never thought of it. It just made me think of it. I'm not a credentialed person. I found the credential system morally offensive.
We're in agreement there too. It's just awful. Sorry.
You know, it's just I was so fucking arrogant. And it was a naive kind of arrogance. But I was like, yeah. I accept your certification that I have completed these classes. I don't accept your certification of my competency or ability. Right? I mean, that has nothing. I don't care about that. That doesn't mean anything to me. Right? The only way I can demonstrate it is by demonstration.
Right.
You try to be an 18-year-old or 19-year-old kid and tell that to a college dean or professor, and it's like you might as well be coming from fucking Mars. But I couldn't. I was such a nerd. I couldn't conceive of how I would be interpreted by.
I understand, but
I couldn't even conceive of it.
That's because they don't think like you do. You're like, you're a dangerous monster that we're not going to unleash upon the world.
Yeah, I tell you, I'm the last American generation of what we consider Anglo aristocracy. I'm just a member of that last generation, and I just don't think there are many. If there's any of us left, and I can tell the difference most of the time between people from German families and people from Anglo families. Right? You can actually tell the difference if you spend enough time at it. And the reason is really interesting. It's that the Anglo aristocracy really believed and really tried to be they really did to be of higher moral standing than the rest of the world by what we consider empirical means. And I think that's hysterical. So how do you produce that? How do you produce an elite that's empirically moral? Well, you do it by demonstrated competency rather than credentialed competency. Credentials don't mean shit.
Well, I regard it as means you're minimally qualified to enter the field and demonstrate something.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so here's the contrary argument: is the act of teaching, and this is what I notice when I speak versus what professors who I would consider an intellectual peer. I listen to them speak. The difference is you get very careful about your words when you're teaching a student body, and you get very specific about how you present the information. In my history, that kind of behavior would be considered fake in a business context.
Right.
or pretentious. Whereas, and so I find that professors are in fact better because they've spent time communicating,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
right? And so that's
They're public speaking as a profession, right?
is really good. I mean, and and it's because they're so you get very sensitive in that job to the fact that students get lost. You imagine me, like I'm talking to you, right? And I go down these, I'll like throw six threads up in the air, and sometimes I'll forget which, which three of them I'm trying to bring together, right? And so, they can't do that, right? Because the students will get it. I mean, I resonate with a particular philosopher who didn't write a book; he just talked.
Mm.
And people took his notes and wrote it down, sort of like Aristotle's. And he's a logician. And I'm thinking, the problem is it's really hard to talk about anything complex in simple terms, because most people can only follow a single axis of causality. So you have to create a simple narrative. Well, that's true, except that if you look at most of the stuff I do, whenever we're talking, I'm like, okay, I'm going to deconstruct that into two or three causal axes that are bringing it about. Because if you don't do that, you tend to make the wrong conclusion. Well, it's easy to understand the story that's a single consistent narrative, and it's really hard to understand the 6 dimensions of causality that bring it about. Right? Until you start out with what's the standard of measure across all these systems? Well, it's the stable equilibrium problem and the 3 means of influence problem, right? I mean, once you see that, then it's like, okay, now I have the basic compass and protractor and ruler to be able to bring about to construct anything from first principles. And so we can do that. But I mean, we're trying to take people from basically a world of analogies that are slightly better than the supernatural analogies and slightly better than the set verbal analogies. And now we're trying to bring them down to an operational descriptions, and it's just fucking hard for people. But professors, that's the thing I noticed, that I wish I had spent more time. Like, I've taught classes, but I didn't do it enough to become as good as they are.
It's hyper specialization.
Yes.
And it's like, you couldn't have learned what you learned if you were doing that.
That's true. I would never.
You wouldn't have a time.
I mean, I bring this up all the time, but what's his name? Forgetting his name. So, what's the particle they just went out and found because they were?
I don't know what you're referring to, I'm afraid.
Higgs boson, Higgs.
Okay.
So Higgs said, I'd never get hired today and then never keep me. And I'm like, I'm in the same position. I mean, which department would I work in? Philosophy, law?
Doesn't matter, Kurt.
Economics? I mean, I don't fucking know.
The deans wouldn't have you anyway.
The deans wouldn't have me anyway because I make all these kids confront. I was thinking about this yesterday, how they don't confront the kids with the folly of their stupid. I mean, they're trying to build all this confidence in students, but it's an ill confidence.
I tell you what, I ran into this kid. And he's 22 or something like this, just a kid. And he comes in and he's very, very forward and very confident, self-confident. And I talked to him about it, and he was, just engaging. You know what I mean? Just amazingly engaging for a young person. And I had a long conversation with the young fellow, and he's like this. I say, well, how did you get like this, right? And he tells me this story. He's talking to the history professor who was in the Vietnam War, and he caught himself. He saw the reflection of his interaction with this Vietnam veteran in his opinions about the Vietnam War, which he has no value having an opinion, being a young person of his age, having not even been alive at the time. And he's reflecting his opinions, and he sees himself reflected in the face of the vet, who is the history teacher, and he's just kind of smirking at him a little bit. And he just recognized how ridiculous he was behaving. And it caused him to self-reflection. He became self-aware of his behavior at the moment and was snapped out of his nonsense. And I'm like, that was pretty impressive. And it is the capacity for self-reflection that is the distinguishing factor here.
And the intellectual honesty and confidence to have intellectual honesty that makes it possible.
Right.
Because many people would retreat into, I have to double down on that. Because otherwise I'll lack the confidence to act. And I'll lose the self-image necessary. We forget that, not all of us have the confidence and will to pursue intellectual honesty. Because intellectual honesty causes us to do exactly what you just said, self-reflect and self-adapt.
It's work.
But people want to avoid all adaptation possible.
That will be
Majority of people.
behavioral economics.
It's behavioral economy. They want to pay. And so I think the answer is that there's probably, I haven't gone out and looked for the research on this, but I would assume pretty obviously that openness to experience openness, which is basically willingness to pay the cost of adaptation. And desire for novelty, right, is the opportunity to adapt, is there. And I assume that there's offsetting traits like neuroticism and whatever, and conscientiousness that impede the expression of it in positive means. So there's a lot of dimensions going on there, but I suppose it should be fairly easy to figure out. But the reality is that so many people try to avoid adaptation. I think it's more common in women because men need to find advantage. And so men need to find advantage over men. And so they'll look for opportunities, which ends up with weird. That's like women think, the female mind thinks of really weird shit to like crystals and whatever, right? And the male mind gets into conspiracies and pseudoscience really easily. So you find women the female mind making excuses for not adapting, which is what crystals and whatever are, right? I mean, it's just an excuse to not adapt. It's just to continue to feel. Right. To because we forget that we talk about social construction, but there's self-construction. So that's so self-construction is what those crystal chicks are doing, or the chakra shit or whatever. Is like they're just trying to find an excuse to say, I just want to feel. I don't want to audit my feelings. I don't want to correct my feelings. I don't want responsibility for correcting those feelings. I just want to feel. And then there's social constructions where you externalize that as various verbal beings. And then there's, of course, warfare against the institutions of cultural production that attempt to bring it about. So we forget that there's self-construction as well. And so you get that. So I don't notice men so much, males so much. I have to see if this stands up to research. Men tend to believe in stupid shit that gives them confidence that they are in control.
Oh, so it'll be like this. Yeah. Okay. So now I think I understand you better about this conspiracy thing, because it's like this. It's like, okay, one of the things I had to do when I was beginning my research and what went wrong with America that ends me up here chatting with you is that I allowed myself to study conspiracies that have occurred in the United States since about 1900. Okay, at length. I went to study things that my father, the historian, will prohibit in his classroom because it's conspiracy. And it's like, and it's certain proofs of conspiracy. There's no question about these actions have being real. And it's like, but not allowed into the historical discourse.
Well, you can't say woke isn't a conspiracy because we know who invented it. We know how he sold it. We know who he sold it to. We know who institutionalized it, and we know how it got out there. We know how long it took. I mean, when did he write that shit? It was like in the 60s.
You're talking about Marcuse. It's from the 60s.
You just find it here. Sorry, I'm trying to find out.
I just have,
I want to say like 63.
yes,
I think, hold on a second. Let me see if I can find it.
it's some,
70.
there's the earlier ones than that though.
No, I'm talking about what
Oh,
we see as woke in education today
oh,
was a specific
we
thing.
would have to defer to, James Lindsay for the detailed,
Well, that's who I'm referring to. That's I said. There's three things he's taught me that I had not fully disambiguated, and this is one of them. And so, what's funny is somebody like 3 weeks ago, somebody says, you're not thinking about this guy, and I'm like, no, I don't. I sort of ignore those guys, and I'm like, that was a mistake.
I don't know that it's a mistake. I don't know that it's a mistake because it's like this. It's like it's a I regard it as what is it? Pathology that has it's you do the what is it called? You dissect the body after the fact, right? Pathological it's not the right term. There's a term for it. Anyway, it's a post-mortem. Anyway, there's a term that I'm missing here. I apologize to everybody. But it's like it's not necessary to dig around the dead fish guts. It's not interesting. It stinks, man. It just stinks to high heaven. I know what went wrong and how to fix it. What the hell do I need to have this discourse for? And I don't need to jump in there and talk.
Well, because it. Well, I mean, let me just throw my screen up here.
Okay, wait. You're not. You are. I'm the host. I'll make you the host. Okay. There we go. That was some interesting little work. We made it. The technology. We learned, Kurt.
I wish.
Now you can share your screen like you intended originally if you have forgotten what you were about.
Let me see if I can find it now. Oh, I know why. It's because it's in Excel. All right, so let's go here. Let's go back to this. I'll go to here. Where the hell are you? Oh, I know why, because it's not in there. Okay, give me a second. I'm being a little stupid here. I've got a little stupid going on. All right, so can I share screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you see this one.
There
right?
you go. I want the audience to be aware of how difficult it was for us to get to this point because we had to Zoom change their technology. We have been working hard to make it so that you can see this screen, kids. Okay. 7 Generations of Warfare by Abrahamic False Promises.
Okay, so what I'm trying to start out with is the female method of warfare.
I like
right?
that.
And I'm working through the history. Right? And so what I've done is I'm trying to put what are the properties of it.
Oh,
So you can see that it's the same behavior throughout history. So what I'm currently working on is what?
Oh, I'm reading that prophet of the origin of it all is evolution.
Yeah.
That made me laugh, man. That's awesome.
So now so here's what I'm trying to do is can you see this now?
7 generation political correctness. I like this. Man.
Which screen do you see?
I'm looking at the spreadsheet. You're on the spreadsheet with generation 7 political correctness under column N.
This one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm trying to expand this now. And I've got to add in other words, I'm trying to bring it up and put it in order because I want to add feminism, libertarianism,
yes,
political correctness, and woke. And I want to show how this is all. I mean, all it is it's the anti-Indo-European and the anti-European, which is just the anti-male.
Right, anti-white in there. And you're gonna have to put.
Well, I mean that's where it is here, right? I mean,
oh, okay.
So I need to add it.
There you go. Oh, okay. Oh, That didn't show up. Hang on.
Where are you?
Hanging out with Kurt, man. It's fun.
I think it's 12. Is it 12? It's 12. Right? Okay, so I'm trying to work on this thing. Now, why is it? Because it's one thing to say there's this tradition that's been evolving over time, and it's another to show its mutation, right? Oh, through time. In other words, the exact same fucking thing, just expressed in different ways across time, but it's the exact same freaking thing. What's so funny?
It's just, it's evil.
It's evil.
And it mutates, and it's organized like organized crime, like occult nonsense. It's evil.
Right. And so I'm just trying to show the genealogy so that I can
The taxonomy of it over time.
taxonomy and genealogy, two different things. So is that true? Taxonomy is a classification, genealogy is genetic classification.
It's ontology. It's ontology.
Ontological, yeah. So I just started putting this together last night. So I'll get it today.
It's fine
But,
work, man.
So I have the grammars, right?
Yes.
Right, and I have the Abrahamic method of deceit, the female method of deceit, and then we've got the epistemology.
Right. I have to object to it a little bit. I want to only have one objection, Kurt, because it's like this. It needs to stem from the right and move to the left. It's going backwards because it's like it should get progressively worse to the left because it's.
Well, I mean, in that case, that's not real. I mean, normally in our society, you look at time from left to right. So these are the evolution through time, so left to right. If you wanted me to do that, I could switch it so that these were the columns and these were the rows. And I could
Whoa.
I could swap columns and rows.
Hang on, I gotta think about what that means. Okay, if we do it like
the generations would be downward instead of a right to left. I mean,
that would work for me because it would be in line with the beta on the diamond. Stemming from unethical, going down into evil. Because it's increasingly refined through time evil.
Yeah, okay. Let me finish working on it.
I'm sorry, Kurt. I just am in awe by this spreadsheet you're sharing with everybody here. It's wonderful. Sorry to interrupt you.
So we've got a bunch of these, right? And realistically, I was thinking about posters. There's it's just not too many, and I've put them all in spreadsheets and put the spreadsheets in the pages, and
yes,
so that's what I'm sort of working on.
It's cool
because when I was listening to Lindsay in his most recent couple, I'm like, shit, I got to pull the woke education system out because it was deliberate.
Yes.
And in most of them, I use feminism and libertarianism and neoconservatism. I don't have.
Okay, wait. There's a generation there. There's the gay thing, the gay liberation thing, and then there's queer, which is, Lindsay distinguishes between the gay liberation and queer theory, which is a recent development, and woke is a overarching function of it.
Yeah, so what you're saying is the refinement.
Yeah, there's a queer that is even more refined.
Sexual. Okay, I get it. these columns will be in the wrong order originally.
No, not gay. No. Gay is another generation, a previous generation.
Yeah, I don't,
Because
has to be-
the queer are after the gays because they're too sufficiently normal. They're insufficiently abnormal or erosive of norms. Insufficient normal erosion by the gays.
yeah, that's, okay, so a generation, as I've got it here, has to consist of a change in properties. I'm not sure that that's like the 4 generations of feminism, the 4 generations of this is the sex, right?
Sexuality, yeah.
Um,
Which
but
is like
isn't this,
it's a it's this look, there's this the queer thing is gender, not sexuality.
how is that different?
Because they say there's 32 genders or 632 genders, for God's sakes. I don't know any number. It's distinct from sexuality because it's bi. The premise that there's bi, homo, or heterosexuality is outside the scope of what these people think at this point because they've queerified it.
Ugh, hell. Oh, pain in the ass to format. The way Excel does its linings
Yeah.
is a pain in the ass. Um, um, wait a minute. So I said we have to do neoconservatism.
Yeah.
So how does this? We have this sort of interesting series here.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if these are just American. I think that's what they're different about. Because if we go into,
It's anti-Americanism.
no, this is,
Okay.
and this.
Oh
is-
yeah. Yeah.
This is. Uh, And this is
French.
This is American. No, that's not really true. Trotsky. This is American. This is anti-male feminism. This is American. And this is Brazilian. I don't know where the fuck
That's
comes from.
American. Jewish.
So these come out of different cultures, the Arabs. We don't fucking know. Where does this come out of? This is yeah, that's right. Suppose I should recolor this. Background. Gray. Oops, what happened there? Background gray. Text. What does that look funny? Oh, it's because I got the. You know, Brad.
What's that?
So this is a pain in the neck.
I know.
So this is black.
Okay. So there's a it ends up, it's like this anti-Europeanism is refined over the time, and it's now anti, it looks increasingly anti-American, because American is the only thing left standing of the European system that has not come and conquered by these people.
That's correct.
Okay.
So you would argue that
it's focused on the power base of Western civilization at the moment. So the focus shifts from
you're saying it's
there's like a localization, right?
yeah.
It's Europe in general there, Germany and France. Yeah. Still continental. That's the power base has shifted in that time frame. But the postmodernist was developed in the post-war era, but America was the power base, and they're using America as American force for projection of that with the media and the social influence that the Americans had post-war for the purpose of projecting that preference into the that beta system into the world.
This guy, I don't know enough about this. I have to, I mean,
Right?
I mean, I know who started it. I don't know how it passed. I mean, what did he write in? Didn't he write in Portuguese?
I don't know.
Let me see if I can find it.
Autopsy. Forensic. It's forensic autopsy that I was looking for, the terminology. That's the beauty of this information. It allows Kirk to make this crazy graph.
Okay, so
this, I want this part where it says the oppressed, that should be in quotes.
where are you?
So Generation 6 postmodernism, it says under line 19, the oppressed. Go down to line 19, the oppressed. I want them to be in quotes because it's whoever we say is oppressed, right? As opposed to the actual oppressed.
The problem is, how do they know they're oppressed?
Because they're told they're oppressed. And they believe they're oppressed because the legend says they're oppressed. Does that make sense?
I mean, yeah, I mean, but I understand how,
It's a claim.
right, the difference between oppressed and disadvantaged
Well,
or incompetent or immoral.
right. But there's no distinction in the ideology between those functions. They're just oppressed.
Yeah, your argument about the power base.
What is that? Power base.
What's the power base? What's
The power base of where's the leverage coming from, right?
Yeah.
So there's a fulcrum. It's the fulcrum, where the fulcrum is. The fulcrum moves in time. Momentary advantage, right? So there's a momentary advantage. Now, so if we talk about momentary advantages, it's like there's a time, there's a location, and there's a the target, and there's a who is being levered, right? It's always the lower class that's being levered, right?
Yep.
For the advantage of someone who would be the dominant class, right?
Mm-hmm. You know, why is it that
there's an interesting function there that you didn't quite capture, and it's interesting. It's like who's this target? Okay, it's like the target shifted. The Catholic Church was the target, and the target was taken out, and then a new target was chosen. Does that make sense? Because E. Michael Jones is all about the Catholic Church, and he's like studying the what happened to the Catholic Church, and it's like their power base was taken out of America, man, by the 60s. And it was a successfully done. Does that make sense?
I'm listening. I'm trying to find it.
It's like the Catholic Church was the target in France, the French Revolution. And that was the English and their allies among this same groups. The Catholic Church maintained force, and in America wasn't taken down until the 60s, I think.
I'm trying to square this. I'm trying to work through the.
Because you could argue that liberalism, what was called liberalism in the last half of the 20th century, was one of these revolutionary shifts, because it's like this. It's like I think specifically about the liberalization of the restrictions on movie production in Hollywood that was taken out in the 30s. The Catholics restricted the movies and what they were able to produce.
Okay, I can't. I'm trying to put that. I can't. I keep getting lost trying to validate that. So can you try me again?
Okay, so the Catholic Church had moral restrictions on movie production in Hollywood. And I don't know the nature of those laws. There were laws in place that were controlling the movies and what was in the movies. And I don't know the proper name for that, but it was taken out in the 30s. The movie restrictions. So it's like so the target was legal restriction of moral restriction upon movies. So it was that was the target, and it was taken out in the 30s. And I don't remember what those laws were called. The blue laws are another set of laws in the United States that were taken out. So demoralization of the community by liberalization of the you would say
They were called progressives back then. Today we call them liberals.
Right.
Because when this, progressivism starts a long time ago.
Yes. And I think that it's part of the wedge.
Well, progressivism, there's progressivism and liberalism. The distinction is Christian versus Jewish. There is liberty and libertarianism. The difference is English versus Jewish. There is conservatism and neoconservatism, English versus Jewish. This feminism versus anti-male feminism, the difference is English versus Jewish. So what happens with progressivism, just like feminism, right? I mean, feminism was about women having rights, not privileges. In other words, having rights equal to men, not having privileges or an attempt to there was no attempt to undermine the family. It's the Jewish movement by Frieden and what's her name? That tries to bring about anti-male feminism, that era. So what happens is you see this what you're calling progressivism is happening in the beginning of the 20th century, right? And what happened, and after the war, what happens is it converts from Christian progressivism to Jewish libertinism and undermining in the post-war period as those people moved here from the Marxist movement in Europe. And whereas the Jews in the prior period had been pretty domesticated, German Jews, we brought in Eastern European Jews who were undomesticated. And so most of this problem is coming from Eastern European Jews, not all of it. And then the status, the political power obtained by those Eastern European Jews was optimized or taken advantage of by the existing Jews in America, which was under the socialist communist. So we brought in a hostile elite with verbal acuity that could be would defeat us under credentialism, where they couldn't defeat us under operationalism or performativism.
What's interesting about the premise of it is interestingly, there was an anti-Semitism at work which was defensive in nature.
Yes.
And because you restrict their capacity to communicate with you, because you know they're gonna whip you if you have a conversation with them. You're gonna be beat in the conversation. You restrict their ability to tell stories, which is why they restricted the movie making in Hollywood. And all of this was eroded over time. Anti-Semitism was one of the tools of it, right? Because it's not fair, or some other argument that you accepted gradually over time and eroded your defenses.
So this period that I'm looking at here is an attempted integration. And
Or infiltration.
Is it? I don't view the libertarians and the neoconservatives. They're just wrong. They weren't acting in an anti-American fashion. The problem
I don't agree. I think they were. I think that they're trying to make America into the empire.
Well, I know, but there's a hold on. That's an error. That's not an evil, right? I mean, that's not undermining. That's advancing. I mean, I don't consider libertarians and neoconservatives. I just consider them wrong. They're not evil.
Hang on.
They're just wrong.
Yeah,
It's an overreach. It's not like they're undermining. They're not trying. Neoconservatives aren't trying to undermine. They're trying to overreach. Libertarians aren't trying to
at who's
trying to overreach,
right?
What?
Yeah, okay. I'm like I put it on the spectrum to the evil, yeah, but it's okay. It doesn't have to be. It can be just merely immoral.
Is it immoral? Neoconservatives are just wrong. It's not even immoral.
Well, it's like this. Like, okay, so
I mean, when I look at them, I think that was fucking stupid. What
specifically are you pointing at?
Well,
what are you pointing at that's wrong?
Well, I mean, both libertarians and conservatives are under the illusion that you can scale, right? It's like this, their concept of their feminine concept of herd has been applied to the international scale at neoconservatism and libertarianism.
I know, but it's like specifically neoconservatism. How is it wrong? What is that? What are they wrong about?
It's the universe. Well, what they're wrong about is the scalability of.
No, what did they do that was wrong?
They tried to overextend the United States.
You think that was an accident?
No, I don't think it was an accident.
But see, it's like this. It's like
look at the Jewish financial elites, the Jewish neoconservative elites, and if I don't believe there are any libertarian elites left, those people thought that they were continuing the heroic post-war vision. Right? They had transferred Jewish globalism into what they have failed at it every other time they've tried this somewhere, but I don't see it as evil. They in their mind, they're acting like Americans. But I don't see that. The Jewish financial elite, they actually believe they're doing good.
I'm not, I'm not, I don't argue that they don't think they're doing good. I'm arguing that they don't have America's interests at mind.
They have globalist interests at mind. And just like they think Judaism and Marxism and socialism can scale infinitely because they're cognitively female, they think the American method can.
Wait, no, I don't think so. I think they think that the American is a useful tool momentarily for us in our global ambitions. And we don't care if we use it up. So they're evil. As far as you're concerned, they're using you up.
All right, so
evil.
yeah, okay.
Because they will dispose of you as soon as you are not useful anymore, and they don't give a damn what happens to you because you're an animal.
So it's direct globalism by
what's the tool?
Hold on, let me finish.
Sorry.
It's direct attempt to achieve feminine universal globalism and credentialed authoritarianism, like they're basically the continue the history of priesthoods by taking advantage of the American order and the European productivity to fund it. So whereas I view the Marxist, neo-Marxist, postmodernists, and feminists as undermining to drag it down. And so
I don't see they see a difference between dragging you down and keeping them up and using you up. It doesn't make one whit of difference.
I can't square that with. I can't square that. I can square that with 1920s Jews.
What's that mean?
Because Jews were extremely hostile after they were given the franchise. It doesn't matter if it was England in the 1830s forward. They became incredibly hostile. In other words, they were free to exercise their frustration and anger, believing that they were superior, just like women believe, just like who believes superior to you. They believe they're superior to whites. Well, the evidence is they're not, or they'd be able to hold together a state. They can't hold together a state. They don't comprehend that their inability to hold a state is evidence of their failure, because the purpose of statehood is self-determination. So they don't have self-determination. But that doesn't mean they don't believe in their history, their tactics, and whatever. Wow.
So I had this conversation with my dear friend, and
are you going to take me on another path there? Or no?
Just a short little story,
okay,
in which the Jewish patient talks to her doctor and says, we don't think they're real Jews because they don't obey the law.
Who's saying this?
The Jewish patient who obeys the law.
Well, I mean,
like this is like
I'm
just telling you what she said.
I know, but I mean, it's like Rabbi Lapin and I mean, I used his name. God damn it. So, it's like we agree there's good Christians and bad Christians, good Jews and bad Jews. Okay. It just happens to be a time in history where bad Jews have an institutional advantage to undermine this one, because in the current
there's another story here which I didn't finish the story, but which I apologize for because I forgot to, which is there's a reason we don't have a state, because God says that we aren't supposed to have a state after the temple was destroyed in 70 AD.
That's justification. That's justification of their failure to maintain a state.
That's right. She said we're not supposed to have a state because we are no good at it, because we always follow the bad ones.
Right. And why are there no female states? They can't survive for the same reason. Because the problem is that you have to burn self-interest in order to produce commons. Anyway.
Right.
And so they think their method is good, but their method is only good as long as it is constrained to areas where it's
Right.
basically wealthy people playing numbers games. Anyway,
Okay.
so the point is I was trying to make is on top of that is just that I don't, you know, I don't we can have this discussion a lot, which is don't attribute to stupidity and malice that can be that which we can be attributed to both stupidity or malice, which can be attributed to both. And
Okay.
yeah, the Jews were really angry. They still are. I have one particular friend, wrong answer, who's absolutely who works at a university nearby, who's in administration at a university nearby, who's Jewish, and she's like, the world is better when white people are gone,
Wow.
and she just openly says it,
Wow.
and that's not a minority opinion.
No, I know it's being projected as the fact.
And so the answer is among white people, the world is better if Jews are gone. Well, I mean, my attitude is that the world is better when everybody fucking behaves.
Everybody mind your manners, right? Don't be rude. Right.
So I don't really, when I look at, I mean, you're the one who pushed this on to me so thoroughly. So if I push back at you with the
It's fair.
same constraint you put upon me, it's that when I look at group evolutionary history, I understand that people don't know what software they're running,
Right.
and their metaphysics can correspond to reality or not. What's happened under the Anglo-American order of modernity is Jews have the false impression that they're superior because they aren't responsible, and they're in industries that consist largely of baitings into hazard,
And they can get away with it.
and they can get away with it. So it's whose fault is it? Is it theirs for pursuing opportunities we haven't outlawed?
That's right.
Or is it ours for not prohibiting, right? I mean, it's like we talked about limits earlier in the conversation.
Right.
Is the problem that we can't beat on women for the fact that they can't see limits when they're not capable of seeing limits. Empathy prohibits their ability.
It's not in their solution set.
All right. So, I mean, why pick on Jewish culture?
We have to try. We have to try. We have to try.
Have to try what? Complaining?
Whatever it is. No, we have to try. It's just, no, you call it complaining. It's just asking by other means.
Fine, whatever. Well, my point being, when I look at the problem,
Okay,
I also have one of my best friends living by who's ethnically Jewish, even if he isn't religiously Jewish.
Okay.
Right. And he's a Russian Jew, right? Right. The red hair, the big round head and everything, I mean, he's like classic. I love the guy, absolutely love this man. Right. But he's like, saying, well, that's my Jewish sentiment coming out, which is basically whenever he feels an emotional reaction to something. Right? He's just aware of it.
What's that?
Right? He's just aware of it.
Okay.
Right? He's completely aware of it. But he's like, Conan is his hero. He's fucking European. Right? I mean, so, I just look at it as the guy's fucking phenomenal. So I don't view it as, as people. There are people who do things on purpose. They're evil. But did they doing things on purpose because they know better, or they do things on purpose because they don't know better? And I'm like, who's responsible? Well, I mean, it's the person with more knowledge. The person with more knowledge is responsible than the person with less knowledge. So, I mean, I view it as, yeah, well, I've said this before. There are Jews, I want them, you can't have them.
No.
But what?
No, I understand you. No, I get it. Go ahead.
So I'm like, there's not the problem is just you bring in another culture. Now we've got black culture, which I think, in white rednecks and black liberals or whatever it is, black rednecks and white liberals, whatever it is Souls does a great job of saying, what we call ghetto culture is just underclass white culture from the east of England. Right? I mean, because that's who migrated there. And the whites went through the transformation to imitate middle class people, and the blacks haven't gone through it yet. But blacks think they're demonstrating black culture. They're not. They're demonstrating white underclass culture.
Whoa,
Africans.
your voice stopped out. It started again.
Fidgeting.
So okay.
Chords over here and it cut it out.
It's okay to
So I mean, do you blame? So the problem is people, I have says, there's a rule of law says that there's no law, no foul. Well, under tort, there's responsibility, but no punishment. There's only restitution. Now, the question for us is, since we know better and we haven't outlawed it, we should have outlawed it back in the McCarthy era. We should have.
They tried.
But no, but we failed, right? They tried,
that was the failure of true conservatism in America. And it's like they were defeated in 1954.
I know that.
And it's like, but so the post that the liberalism which came out of the 30s, which is the communist movement, the Wobblies and all that from World War I, right? And it's like, so
absolutely.
And it's like, okay, I'm just.
We had World War I. Between 1890 and 1920, whatever, we brought in way too many people. It caused as much chaos as bringing in the Irish had before, and as much chaos as bringing the Hispanics has now, right? And the Third
World
War
by intention,
right? It was, well, in the 20s, was it intentional? Was
I will state, as a matter of fact, it was by intention. I've done the historic research on this subject.
I'm willing to
the Carnegie Institute is involved. The Carnegie Foundation is involved from 1910. When they were plotting World War I.
Okay, so I agree. I will accept it because I don't know the answer.
It's just stunning because they studied for 1 year. The investigator in 1950s, the Congress had an investigator who sent a lawyer, a female lawyer, to New York to look at the books of the Carnegie trustees for 2 weeks. And it drove her mad. And it drove her mad to the point where she was unable to practice law ever again. And it's like this. She reported what she found, and they studied for 1 year in 1910. Is there a way more effective than war to dramatically change the character of a nation?
No.
They studied it for a year, and with all due diligence, they proved it to be so. So the next year they said, how do we get the United States in a war? And they decided to get a hold of the State Department, and so they did. And the war was started, and when Woodrow Wilson got them in the war, the Carnegie trustees sent him a letter, said, good job, make sure it doesn't end too fast. I mean, and this all came out in the 50s in congressional testimony, which was abruptly halted by unusual means. The chief investigator was threatened. A man came and told him to his face, I'm from the ADL. I was sent to kill you. Any questions about how this works? This is coming from old school, old. All these changes in the immigration and stuff, this has all been part of the game, as far as I'm concerned. So it's a deep conspiracy theory, right? But it's there's evidence of afoot, and it's like to change the character of the American nation for such purposes as are documented.
Right. So I actually know that part. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out. So what you're saying is it's always been intentional by at least some of the elites.
I don't regard any of it as accidents when we're talking about these momentous changes, because it's like Russia was conquered by these people. They turn it into a beta state.
Mhm.
And then America was used in World War II and supported the beta state and continued to support the beta state until it died for the purposes of the same group.
Right. Okay. So,
And the Nazis were created by the same group for their own purposes.
right. So again,
I don't know where that leads you, and I apologize for the distraction to you.
I'm going to cop out and say that I know what I'm trying to do.
I understand you.
I am trying to is to produce a law that prohibits the expression of antisocial behavior by what I call the female means, which includes the means they use, because we have not sufficiently suppressed the means by which they use. They are not the only people that use this method. They are just the people who are best at this method. So I'm just going to say, fine. If I look at it and I'm like, I look at all problems as, do the Muslims know what they're doing? Do women know what they're doing? Do devout Christians know what they're doing? Do the Chinese? Nobody fucking knows what they're doing. They're
Okay,
just monkeys. And
fine.
so when I look at it and I say, well, whose job is it? Whose job can it be to train the animals?
It's got to be Dad's job.
Well, Dad has to know enough to do it, and he's got to be explained to the monkeys why they need to do it, right? And so, well, they can't do it anymore. So, I mean, I that's my basic argument, and you're the one who drove me out of, drove me back to just stick with the science and the solutions. And so, forgive me if I push back a little bit on saying, okay, you're right. I'm looking at this, and I don't have to have any knowledge of incentives for people to naturally pursue rational incentives of self-interest, right? In other words, I don't need to have any. If the opportunity exists to exploit, someone will discover the means of exploiting that opportunity.
That's right. That's right.
And so
the German says Gelegenheit macht Diebe, which is leaving stuff around makes people into thieves.
Yes. Okay. So
opportunity.
So I'm just trying to stick with, okay, what's the genealogy of this problem? And in other words, I'm trying to explain it as just boring science, and we're all just dumb fucking monkeys doing our work. Right? And it's our job as the people who discovered modernity, right? The people who invented it. People who invented the Bronze Age expansion, the Iron Age expansion, and the Steel Age expansion. We've invented the three expansions, and the world is better for all three of them. Although they might disagree with the Indo-European expansion. I might too. So in that sense, sure. My goal is to just, how do I outlaw this? And how do I outlaw this? By showing that it's just physics. In other words, we don't have an opportunity to do otherwise. It's not a preference. It's a truth. It's a science. It's a truth. There's what I'm proposing isn't a matter of opinion. In other words, suppressing irreciprocity, suppressing conspiracy, suppressing undermining, suppressing the female antisocial behaviors, whether they're in ordinary female interpersonal form, female social intersocial form, or expressed in their ultimate and as Jewish undermining, right? There's no difference. It's just the same fucking problem. How do I stop that problem? Well, we stop the problem like the way we said, as we we plug the holes in our law. Our law is empirical, right? It is, and so let's just plug the holes in our empirical law and outlaw it, and the problem will be solved.
Okay, so I'm gonna reflect that.
And the only reason I need to do the genealogy is to basically do a demonstrated proof that the method is consistent over
Yes.
time. And
Yes,
it's underlying
Okay.
method we have to prohibit, so that we prohibit all its
like
instant
that.
lives over time.
I like that. And it is a work in progress. I like that, and I like the way it looks, and I can see a lot of potential expansion of that table, and because it goes over all time. It's okay. But the issue is this. It's so I'm going to refine what you've said a little bit, because it's like this. It's refine the thought process, to refine the articulations, to restrain misbehavior on a personal, a social, and a legal, all levels,
Yes,
in that order, because it's necessary for the person to understand, to be able to speak it and draw those lines in order to project it into the legal space, in the
correct.
social, to protect the social environment.
Yes,
That's all. So it's I'm reflecting toward Luke and his work on the individual, and bouncing that up into the social strata where you're attempting to enact this function.
so yeah, my understanding is, because from the evidence, is that if you put laws in place, and those laws are constitutional, and those constitutions are scientific, in other words, constitutional, in other words, their rights, obligations, and alienations that are natural, I mean, scientific law, right? The rules of cooperation. Then what happens is, within a decade, the population will adapt to those laws by mere necessity of avoiding court. And that's because that's what we seem to do. And we don't have to even understand all the laws and all their applications, because in each niche of the market, people have modified their behavior to accommodate the law, so they only act within it in order to, so it's via negativa. We just remove the bad instead of telling people what to do. So this is my difference between philosophy, which is what Luke is trying to do, and law, is that the philosophy tells you what you should do and could do. And I just do what you can't do. And I know that what'll happen is, by doing that, evolution will take care of the problem.
Kurt, I think it was a fairly wide-ranging discourse, and a little bit more heat than expected. It was good though. It's like, I think, very productive. I hope you agree. I really
Me?
do.
I
do
always
hope you
agree that
I
mean,
very
I'd
much
rather talk about hookers and cigars and scotch, but no, I wouldn't. But I mean, I'd rather laugh about that stuff. I mean, I had one of the best times I've had in my life is taking about a dozen guys to Odessa for a bachelor party, and trying to consume all the scotch at every bar we could find
in town.
You believe it or not, you can do that with enough guys. Why? Because they don't keep that much on hand.
They're not ready. They're not ready.
Not ready for it. You can make people run out of Jack Daniels in certain parts of this world. And you can make a lot of them run out of it.
And that's all right.
Especially if you're just drinking for like days on end.
It's a challenge. It's just a challenge. It's a rating party, right?
And Odessa's a bit like, Odessa's got a little Vegas thing going on.
Oh yeah.
Because it's got the beaches and shit, right? And it's got the shopping stores. And so it's like, the girls go there for the 100-mile rule. And so, and they're not trashy. I mean, despite the reputation washerwomen have, in general, they're not that trashy. So you can just go hang out with, you can take 10 guys, hang out with 10 girls. There's nothing else going on there, except that there turns out to be, a couple, this has happened, right? So that happens, especially if you're going with a couple of tall, handsome Slavic guys who are really funny, right? So that works out to be fun. So that's, we could talk about that kind of stuff. That would be fun. But this is still fun too, and it's useful. This is good work. It's good work. I hope you thought it was productive. I hope that the viewing audience thought it was interesting and productive as well. I'm going to tell them this is episode 2054. Hit like, hit subscribe, hit your notification, leave your generous and wonderful productive comments below. Because Kurt and me we just wonder what's going to happen next. I suppose there's a couple of threads here I ought to go summarize somewhere. was pretty good stuff today. Anyway, love you, man. Thank you for today.
Kurt,
It was a lot of good talks today. I'm
it's
really
just,
fucking tired though.
I
am tired.
respect that. It's like that. You got to recover. So I look forward to chatting with you tomorrow, sir.
All right, I'm gonna take a nap.
I'll send you the link. Bye.